My name is Haley, and at 34 years old, I never expected to be fighting for access to my own property. The lake house my mother left me was supposed to be my sanctuary, not a battleground. When my stepmother Diane called me that Tuesday evening, her words cut deeper than any knife could. "You are not coming," she said coldly. "This trip is for real family." As I hung up the phone, my hands trembling with rage and hurt, I knew something had to change. I had been a doormat long enough. Before I continue with my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up for yourself against family members who tried to take what was rightfully yours. Growing up, life was simple and beautiful. My mother, Catherine, was my best friend, my guide, and my protector. We spent endless summers at our lake house in northern Michigan, a property that had been in her family for 3 generations. Those early memories are filled with the scent of pine trees, the sound of lapping water against the dock, and laughter echoing across the lake. My father Gerald was often busy with his construction business, but when he joined us, those days felt magical. We were not wealthy by any means, but we were rich in love and experiences. Everything changed when I turned 15. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, and within 8 months she was gone. The world became colorless overnight. Dad and I moved through our grief like ghosts, barely communicating, each lost in our own pain. I would often retreat to my room, surrounded by photos of Mom and me at the lake house, clinging to those memories like a lifeline. Just 6 months after Mom passed, Dad introduced me to Diane. She was tall, blonde, and had a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Your father and I have been seeing each other," she announced during our first dinner together. I pushed my food around my plate, unable to speak. It felt too soon, too raw. But Dad seemed happier than he had been in months, so I tried to be supportive. Within weeks, Diane and her 2 children moved into our home. Tyler was 14, then sullen and angry about the move. Vanessa was 12, quiet and watchful. I made genuine efforts to welcome them. I helped Tyler set up his gaming system in the basement and showed Vanessa my collection of art supplies. I wanted to build a bridge, to create some semblance of a new family from the ashes of what I had lost. But Diane had other plans. The subtle exclusion began almost immediately. She would take Vanessa shopping without inviting me. Family movie nights would be planned when I was scheduled to work my part-time job at the local bookstore. When I would enter a room where she and Dad were talking, their conversation would abruptly change. "We were just discussing grown-up matters," she would say with that plastic smile. 3 months after they met, Dad and Diane got married in a small ceremony. I stood beside him, trying to be happy for his newfound joy while feeling like my mother was being erased. My father seemed oblivious to the dynamics developing in our home. When I tried to talk to him about feeling excluded, he would sigh heavily. "Haley, please try harder. Diane is doing her best to bring this family together. You need to meet her halfway." But no matter how much I tried, the distance only grew. Diane began referring to Tyler and Vanessa as the kids, while addressing me by name, as if I existed in a different category. The lake house became my sanctuary during those difficult high school years. In her will, Mom had specifically left it to me, though I would not have full ownership until I turned 25. Dad retained usage rights until then, but the property was legally designated as mine. I think Mom somehow knew I would need that connection to her, that physical space that held our happiest memories. After graduating high school, I went to college as far away as I could reasonably afford. I limited my visits home to major holidays and the occasional weekend when I knew Diane would be away visiting her sister. My relationship with Dad became increasingly strained. Phone calls grew shorter and conversations superficial. When I graduated college, I surprised everyone, including myself, by revealing a talent for real estate investment. I had studied business administration and used a small inheritance from my maternal grandmother to purchase my first property. By 28, I had a modest but growing portfolio of rental properties and a comfortable condo in Chicago. In recent years, I had been making more effort to repair my relationship with Dad. He was getting older, and despite everything, I loved him deeply. I would invite him to visit me in Chicago, sometimes alone, sometimes with Diane if she insisted on coming. I attended Tyler and Vanessa's college graduations and even helped Vanessa find her first apartment when she moved to Minneapolis. I thought things were improving slowly but surely. I believed that as adults we could move past the tensions of our blended family beginnings. How wrong I was. It all started innocently enough with a group text from Dad in early June. Annual Matthews family reunion last weekend in July. Save the date. I immediately marked my calendar, even rescheduling a business trip to make sure I could attend. Family reunions had become a tradition over the last few years, usually held at a rented venue or park, and I valued these rare occasions when everyone made an effort to get along. A week later, I received an accidental call from Dad. When I answered, I realized he had not meant to call me at all. I could hear him talking to Diane about reunion plans. I was about to hang up when I heard my name mentioned. Haley will probably want to have input on everything Diane said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of annoyance. She just wants to be involved, Dad replied weakly. Well, speaking of involvement, I was thinking about the location. What about that lake house? It would be perfect for a family gathering, plenty of space, and it would save us money on rentals. My ears perked up at this. They were talking about my lake house. I had been visiting less frequently in recent years due to my busy work schedule, but I still tried to spend at least 2 weeks there every summer, usually alone or with a few close friends. Before I could hear Dad's response, I hung up, not wanting to eavesdrop further, but the seed had been planted in my mind. Perhaps offering the lake house would be a generous gesture, a way to continue building bridges. I called Dad the next day. I heard you and Diane talking about the reunion, I admitted. I know it was an accidental call, but I wanted to offer the lake house as a venue. It would be perfect for everyone, and I would love to host. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Dad's voice artificially bright. That would be wonderful, honey. Let me talk to Diane and get back to you. Within an hour, Diane herself called me, her voice syrupy sweet. Haley, darling, your father told me about your generous offer. We would be delighted to have the reunion at the lake house. It makes perfect sense, and everyone will be so excited. Not a thank you, I noted, but I pushed the thought aside. Great, I can head up there a few days early to get everything ready. The place could use a good cleaning, and I will need to stock the kitchen. Oh, do not worry about all that, Diane said quickly. I will handle everything. You just show up on Friday with everyone else. This struck me as odd, but I agreed, not wanting to start any conflict. In the weeks that followed, I noticed I was increasingly excluded from the planning process. Family group chats would fall silent when I contributed ideas. My texts about preparations went unanswered for days. When I called Dad to discuss sleeping arrangements, he seemed uncomfortable and quickly passed the phone to Diane, who assured me everything was under control. Then I began noticing social media posts from Tyler and Vanessa. They were discussing the upcoming family lake house vacation with excitement, tagging each other and various cousins, but never including me in the conversations. Diane had apparently created an event page for the reunion that I had not been invited to join. 2 weeks before the reunion, I decided to address the situation directly. I called Dad, determined to have a straightforward conversation about feeling excluded. Dad, I feel like I am being pushed out of the reunion planning, even though it is at my house. Is there something going on that I should know about? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. Haley, sweetie, there have been some discussions about the arrangements. Diane thinks it might be best if you could come for just the Saturday activities rather than staying the whole weekend. I was stunned into silence. I was being told I could not stay at my own property. But Dad, it is my house. What do you mean I cannot stay there? It is just that space is tight with all the cousins coming, and Diane has already worked out all the sleeping arrangements. I can sleep in my own bedroom, I said, my voice rising. The master bedroom is mine. Mom left the house to me, remember? The line went quiet for a moment, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of the phone being taken from Dad. Haley. Diane's voice was cold and clipped. I think it is time we had a frank conversation. This reunion is for family, real family. Your constant attempts to insert yourself where you are not wanted are becoming tiresome. You are not coming to the lake house. You can meet everyone at the restaurant in town for dinner on Saturday if you must make an appearance, but the house is for those of us who are actually family. I felt as though I had been slapped. What are you talking about? It is my house. Mom left it to me. A house you never visit, never maintain, and clearly do not appreciate. Your father has been paying the taxes and upkeep for years. In everything but the most technical, legal sense, it belongs to this family now. Your mother has been gone for nearly 20 years. It is time you moved on instead of clinging to the past. I could hear Dad in the background saying something about calming down, though I could not tell which of us he was addressing. Put Dad back on the phone, I demanded, my voice shaking. After some muffled arguing, Dad came back on the line. Haley, please try to understand. Diane has put a lot of work into planning this reunion. Maybe this year it would be easier if you just came for the dinner. Easier for whom, Dad? Certainly not for me being banned from my own property. Are you seriously siding with her on this? His sigh told me everything I needed to know. I am not taking sides. I am just trying to keep the peace. By sacrificing me, again. I hung up before he could respond. I sat in my condo living room, phone clutched in my hand, tears streaming down my face. After all these years, nothing had changed. I was still the outsider, still being pushed aside to accommodate Diane and her vision of real family, and my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, was still standing by and letting it happen. I called my best friend Jasmine immediately after hanging up with Dad. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial her number. They are using my house for the family reunion, but told me I am not welcome, I said. As soon as she answered, my voice breaking, my own father is letting her kick me out of my own property. Jasmine came over with a bottle of wine and a listening ear. As I recounted the conversation in detail, her expression shifted from sympathy to outrage. This is beyond ridiculous, she said, refilling our glasses. That house legally belongs to you. They cannot just claim it and exclude you. Diane said Dad has been paying the taxes and maintenance, I admitted. Which is true, but only because we had an arrangement. When Mom left me the house, Dad retained usage rights until I turned 25. After that, we agreed he would continue handling the basic expenses since I was just starting my career. I have offered to take over multiple times in recent years, but he always insisted it was fine. That does not give them the right to act like they own it, Jasmine pointed out. Have you checked the deed recently? Made sure everything is still properly in your name? I had not, and this question planted a seed of worry. What if there had been some legal maneuvering I was unaware of? I made a mental note to contact my lawyer first thing in the morning. What are you going to do? Jasmine asked, after we had talked for hours. I do not know. Part of me wants to just let it go, not create more drama. But another part feels like this is a line that cannot be uncrossed. They are literally trying to take my property and exclude me from it. Check your social media, Jasmine suggested, pulling out her phone. I bet they are all talking about it. She was right. I had been avoiding social media since the call, but when I logged in, I found multiple posts from Diane about the upcoming family vacation at our beautiful lake house. There were comments from extended family members expressing excitement, posts from Tyler about fishing on our family dock, and pictures Vanessa had shared of previous visits labeled returning to our summer home. Our lake house, our dock, our summer home. The language was deliberate and possessive. They had been steadily rewriting the narrative, erasing my ownership from the family story. How long had this been going on? How had I not noticed? This is calculated, Jasmine said, scrolling through the posts. They have been laying groundwork to establish some kind of claim on your property. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer, Maria Santos, who had helped with some of my real estate investments. I forwarded her the social media posts and explained the situation. First things first, she said, after listening to my story. I will pull the current deed and tax records to confirm your legal standing, but based on what you have told me, your ownership is clear. A verbal family arrangement about who pays the taxes does not change the deed. By the end of the day, Maria had confirmed what I already knew. The lake house was solely in my name. The deed had transferred fully to me when I turned 25, as specified in my mother's will. My father had no legal ownership stake, only the informal arrangement we had made about expenses. You have every right to control who enters your property, Maria assured me. If you do not want them there, you can legally prevent them from entering. This confirmation should have been reassuring, but it only intensified my emotional turmoil. Did I really want to take legal action against my own family? Against my father? I spent the next few days in a fog, unable to concentrate on work, replaying the conversation with Diane and my father over and over. It was Jasmine who finally broke through my paralysis. You know what the real problem is, she said during our lunch break. You have been conditioned to doubt yourself, to back down, to prioritize keeping the peace over standing up for yourself. This has been happening since you were 15 years old. Her words hit me hard because they were true. For nearly 20 years I had been yielding ground, making myself smaller, accepting scraps of attention and affection from my father because I feared losing him completely. And where had it gotten me? Explicitly excluded from my own property, being told I was not real family. What would your mother want you to do? Jasmine asked gently. The question crystallized everything. Mom had left me the lake house for a reason. It was my heritage, my connection to her, the physical manifestation of our bond. She would be heartbroken to see how I had been treated, how her precious gift had been co-opted. I need to stand up for myself, I said finally. But I am not sure how. We spent the rest of the afternoon crafting a plan. I would take time off work and travel to the lake house ahead of the reunion. I would change the locks, making it clear that access to the property was on my terms. I would not be aggressive or vindictive, but I would establish firm boundaries. I contacted a local locksmith in the town near the lake house and scheduled them to meet me there 3 days before the reunion was set to begin. I also hired a security company to install cameras at the main entry points, not because I expected trouble, but because I wanted documentation of whatever happened next. As the day of my departure approached, my resolve wavered several times. Was I overreacting? Would this permanently damage my relationship with my father? Was the lake house worth the potential fallout? This is not just about the house, Jasmine reminded me the night before I left. This is about standing up for yourself after years of being pushed aside. If you do not draw this line, where will it end? Will they just continue taking pieces of you until there is nothing left? She was right. This was about more than property. It was about dignity, respect, and finally saying, enough is enough. I packed my car the next morning with a curious mix of dread and determination. Whatever happened next would change my family dynamics forever. There would be no going back to the careful dance of appeasement I had been performing for most of my life. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. The 5-hour drive to the lake house gave me plenty of time to think. I followed the familiar highway north, watching as the urban landscape of Chicago gradually gave way to the rolling countryside of Michigan. With each passing mile, memories flooded back. Mom and I singing along to the radio on similar journeys. Dad teaching me to identify different tree species as we drove. The growing excitement as we neared our summer haven. Now those happy memories were tinged with anxiety. What would happen when my family arrived to find me there? The locks changed. Would there be a confrontation? Would Dad finally stand up for me? Or would he once again choose the path of least resistance? I arrived at the lake house just after 2 in the afternoon. The property looked much as it always had, a large, rustic cabin-style home, nestled among tall pines, with a sprawling deck overlooking the clear blue lake. But as I got closer, I noticed signs of neglect that had not been there during my last visit. The flower beds my mother had so lovingly tended were overgrown with weeds. The exterior could use a fresh coat of stain. The dock had a broken board that no one had bothered to repair. For all Diane's talk about maintaining the property, it was clear that no one was giving it the care it deserved. This only strengthened my resolve. I unlocked the door with my key and stepped inside. The familiar scent of pine and lake water greeted me, but underneath was the musty smell of a place that had been closed up too long. I walked through the rooms, taking inventory. Family photos that had once prominently featured my mother and me had been replaced with pictures of Dad, Diane, Tyler, and Vanessa. My childhood bedroom had been completely redecorated as a guest room, with no trace of my existence remaining. It was as if I had been systematically erased from the house's history. I called the locksmith Thomas, who arrived within the hour. He was an older man with kind eyes who remembered my mother. "Catherine was a lovely woman," he said, as he worked on the front door lock. "She used to bring me cookies whenever I did work up here. You look just like her." His casual mention of my mother brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It had been so long since anyone had spoken of her to me with such simple fondness. "Thank you for remembering her," I said quietly. "Hard to forget," Thomas replied. "She was always talking about her little girl and how someday this place would be yours. She would be proud to see you taking care of it now." His words were exactly what I needed to hear. This was not just about asserting my legal rights. It was about honoring my mother's wishes and protecting her legacy. Thomas changed the locks on all exterior doors and provided me with a set of new keys. The security company arrived shortly after installing discrete cameras at the front and back entrances. By evening, the house was secure. I spent the night cleaning, airing out rooms, and reclaiming the space. In the master bedroom closet, I found a box of my mother's things that had somehow escaped Diane's purge. Old photo albums, handwritten recipes, a few pieces of jewelry, too sentimental to be valuable. I sat on the floor, surrounded by these treasures, feeling my mother's presence more strongly than I had in years. "I am doing the right thing, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "I know I am." The next morning, I continued with my preparations. I stripped all the beds and washed the linens. I cleaned the kitchen thoroughly and drove into town for groceries. If this confrontation was going to happen, I would face it in a house that reflected my standards, not Diane's neglect. In the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "We will arrive around noon tomorrow. Looking forward to a great weekend." He made no mention of our last conversation, no acknowledgement of the fact that I had been explicitly told not to come. It was as if he expected me to simply fade away, to accept my exclusion without protest. His willful blindness made my heart ache, but it also strengthened my determination. I did not respond to the text. Let them be surprised. Let them face the consequences of their actions for once. I slept fitfully that night, rehearsing in my mind what I would say when they arrived. I needed to be firm but not vengeful, clear but not cruel. This was about establishing boundaries, not punishing them, though part of me certainly wanted them to feel the hurt they had caused me. By morning I was exhausted but resolute. I made coffee and sat on the deck watching the sun rise over the lake, trying to center myself for what was to come. At precisely 11:45 the next morning, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. From my position in the upstairs bedroom window, I watched as 3 vehicles pulled up in front of the house. Dad and Diane in their SUV, Tyler and his girlfriend in a compact car, and Vanessa with her husband in a minivan. They emerged from their vehicles laughing and talking completely at ease, as if arriving at their own home. Diane directed everyone like a general commanding troops. "Tyler, get the coolers from the back. Vanessa, make sure the kids do not wander toward the water yet. Gerald, unlock the house so we can start bringing things in." I watched as my father approached the front door, key in hand. He tried it once, then again with more force. His confusion was evident even from my vantage point. "The key is not working," he called to Diane. She marched over, hand extended. "Let me try. You probably are not doing it right." When her attempt also failed, I saw the first flicker of concern cross her face. She rattled the doorknob aggressively, then peered through the front window. I stepped back slightly, not ready to be seen just yet. "Someone changed the locks," she announced, her voice rising with indignation. "Gerald, call the property manager. This is unacceptable." "We do not have a property manager," Diane's dad said, looking confused. "I handle everything myself." "Then call a locksmith." "We cannot stand out here all day. The kids are getting restless, and we have food that needs refrigeration." Dad pulled out his phone, but then paused, a thought seemingly occurring to him. "Let me try calling Haley first. Maybe she knows something about this." My phone rang in my pocket. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Dad." "Haley. Thank goodness. We are at the lake house, but there seems to be a problem with the locks. Do you know anything about this?" "Yes, Dad. I changed the locks yesterday." There was a long pause. "You? What? Why would you do that?" "Because it is my house, Dad, mine. And I was explicitly told by your wife that I was not welcome here for the reunion. Remember that conversation?" Another pause, longer this time. I could hear Diane in the background demanding to know what was happening. "Are you inside right now?" he finally asked. "Yes, I am." "Haley, this is ridiculous. Come down and open the door so we can talk about this like adults." I moved to the window again, making myself visible. I saw Dad look up and spot me, his expression, a mix of surprise and frustration. Diane followed his gaze, her face darkening when she saw me. "I am happy to talk," I said into the phone. "But I will not be opening the door until certain things are clear." By now, everyone was looking up at me in the window. Tyler seemed more confused than angry. Vanessa was whispering urgently to her husband. The children, oblivious to the tension, were already exploring the yard. "What are you doing?" Diane shouted up at me. "Open this door immediately." I ended the call with Dad and opened the window wider so I could speak to them directly. This property belongs to me. I called down my voice steadier than I expected. It was left to me by my mother, and I have the legal deed to prove it. I was explicitly told by Diane that I was not welcome here because, and I quote, "This trip is for real family." Well, if I am not family, then you are all strangers to me, and I do not allow strangers in my home. This is outrageous, Diane spluttered. Gerald, do something. My father looked utterly lost, caught between his wife's anger and his daughter's resolve. Haley, please. There has been a misunderstanding. Of course you are family. That is not what Diane said on the phone, Dad. She was very clear. And you stood by and let it happen, just like you always do. I never said that Diane protested, though her face had gone pale. Gerald, she is making things up to cause trouble. I have the call recorded, I said calmly, though this was a bluff. Every word. Diane's expression shifted from outrage to calculation. She turned to my father, placing a hand on his arm, her voice suddenly saccharine. Gerald, darling, this is all a silly miscommunication. Tell Haley we would love for her to join us for the weekend. There is plenty of room for everyone. The abrupt change in her demeanor was almost comical. One moment she was furious, the next she was the picture of family harmony. But I was done with her manipulations. It is too late for that, I said. You showed me who you really are, and more importantly, you showed Dad. For 20 years, you have been pushing me out, erasing my mother's memory and treating me like an inconvenient reminder of Dad's past. And for 20 years, Dad has let you do it. I looked directly at my father, whose face had crumpled with something like recognition. Perhaps he was finally seeing the truth he had been avoiding for so long. Haley, I never meant for things to be this way, he said softly. But you let them become this way, I replied. And now here we are. Vanessa stepped forward, always quick to defend her mother. You cannot just lock us out. We drove for hours to get here. We have children who need to use the bathroom. There are public restrooms at the state park, half a mile down the road, I replied. And plenty of hotels in town with vacancies. I checked. This is our family's lake house, Tyler interjected, finding his voice. We have been coming here for years. No, Tyler. This is my lake house, which I have generously allowed you to use. But that generosity ends when I am told I am not welcome in my own home. Diane was growing more agitated by the second. Gerald, call the police. She cannot do this. We have rights. Actually, she can, came a voice from the driveway. Thomas the locksmith had arrived carrying a toolbox. I could not help overhearing. This property is deeded solely to Haley Matthews. I verified it myself yesterday before changing the locks. She has every legal right to determine who enters. Diane rounded on him. And who are you? This is none of your business. Thomas Wilson, ma'am. I have been the locksmith in these parts for 40 years. Knew Catherine Matthews well. Helped install the original locks on this place back in the 80s. He nodded toward me in the window. Her mother would be proud to see her standing up for herself. Thomas's unexpected support left Diane momentarily speechless. Several neighbors had now emerged from their properties, drawn by the commotion. This very public embarrassment seemed to be the final straw for her. This is absolutely outrageous, she hissed, turning back to Dad. I will not stand here being humiliated. We are leaving. Diane, wait, Dad said, reaching for her arm. We need to resolve this. She jerked away from him. There is nothing to resolve. Your daughter has made her choice. Now you make yours. Are you coming with your family, or are you staying with her? The ultimatum hung in the air. I held my breath, not daring to hope that for once, just once, my father would choose me. He looked up at me, then back at Diane, conflict written across his face. Let me talk to Haley alone, he said finally. We need to work this out. There is nothing to work out, Diane was nearly shouting now. Either she opens the door and apologizes or we leave. Those are the options. No, Diane, Dad, said his voice, finding a firmness I had not heard in years. Those are your options. Mine are more complicated. For a moment, Diane seemed stunned by his resistance. Then her expression hardened. Fine. You deal with your spoiled, entitled daughter. The rest of us will find somewhere civilized to stay. She turned to Tyler and Vanessa. Kids, pack everything back in the cars. We are going to find a hotel. Tyler hesitated, looking between his mother and my father. Vanessa immediately began herding her children back toward the minivan, her husband following with resigned efficiency. I will call you when I have figured things out, Dad said to Diane. She did not respond, just stalked back to their SUV and got in, slamming the door with enough force to shake the vehicle. As the caravan of cars pulled away with only my father remaining in the driveway, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that I had stood my ground, sadness for the family fracture, and uncertainty about what would come next. From my window, I called down to Dad. There is a coffee shop in town called Lakeside Brew. Meet me there in an hour. We need to talk. He nodded, his shoulders slumped with the weight of 20 years of choices finally catching up to him. As he got into his car and drove away, I leaned against the window frame, exhausted, but strangely at peace. For the first time since my mother died, I had honored her memory by valuing myself the way she would have wanted. The Lakeside Brew was quiet for a Saturday afternoon. I chose a table in the back corner, ordered a latte, and waited. Dad arrived precisely on time, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. I do not even know where to begin, he said after a long silence. How about with an apology, I suggested quietly. He nodded, meeting my eyes directly. I am sorry, Haley. Not just for what happened with the reunion, but for 20 years of failing to protect you, for letting Diane push you to the margins of our family, for not seeing what was happening right in front of me. The simplicity and directness of his apology caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, excuses, attempts to minimize the situation. But he seemed to have crossed some internal threshold, finally seeing the truth that had been there all along. Why did you let it happen? I asked the question that had haunted me for years, finally spoken aloud. Dad sighed heavily. After your mother died, I was lost, completely adrift. I could barely function, barely take care of myself, let alone a grieving teenager. When I met Diane, she was organized, competent, decisive, all the things I was not. She made decisions when I could not. She kept our household running when I could barely get out of bed. He took a sip of his coffee, gathering his thoughts. I convinced myself that her strength was what we both needed, that her taking control was a good thing. And by the time I realized how much she had isolated you, how she had turned you into an outsider in your own home, it felt too late to fix it. It was never too late, Dad. I know that now. But I was a coward. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being diplomatic. In reality, I was choosing the path of least resistance. It was easier to let Diane have her way than to confront the problems in our blended family. His honesty was both healing and painful. For so long I had wondered if I was imagining the dynamics, if I was the problem. Having him acknowledge the truth validated decades of hurt. When Diane suggested using the lake house for the reunion, I thought it was a good idea, he continued. A chance for everyone to enjoy the property together. I had no idea she planned to exclude you. When she told you not to come, I was shocked, but I still did not stand up to her. That is my greatest failure in all of this. Why does she hate me so much, Dad? What did I ever do to her? Dad shook his head sadly. It is not about you, Haley. It never was. Diane has always been threatened by your mother's memory, by the life I had before her. The lake house is a physical reminder of that previous life of Catherine. When your mother left it specifically to you, I think Diane took it as a posthumous slight. That is ridiculous. Mom made her will before Dad even met Diane. I know, but Diane has spent years convincing herself and trying to convince me that the lake house should be considered family property, not just yours. She has been laying groundwork talking about our lake house to everyone who would listen. I suspect she hoped that eventually you would lose interest in it and it would default to becoming a general family asset. The calculation behind this strategy stunned me. While I had been focusing on my career, occasionally visiting the property I loved, but took somewhat for granted, Diane had been orchestrating a slow-motion appropriation. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Have you ever signed any documents regarding the lake house that Diane prepared? Anything transferring partial ownership or rights? He looked alarmed. No, absolutely not. I would never do that. The house was Catherine's gift to you. I have always respected that. Relief washed over me. At least there had been no legal manipulation to match the emotional one. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Tyler, who spotted us through the coffee shop window and came in alone. "Can I join you?" he asked hesitantly. I nodded, and he pulled up a chair. Mom took Vanessa and the kids to that resort on the other side of the lake, he explained. I told her I needed some time to think. About what I asked. Tyler looked uncomfortable. About everything that happened today. About what you said. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have been thinking about how things have been since we became a family. I was just a kid when it all started, but looking back, I can see that you got pushed out. His admission surprised me. Tyler and I had never been close, had never really discussed our family dynamics. Mom has always had this thing about being in control, he continued, about defining who belongs and who does not. I benefited from it, so I never questioned it. But today, seeing how far she was willing to go claiming your property and excluding you from it, it made me question a lot of things. Like what Dad asked. Like all the stories she has told us over the years. About how Haley was difficult and ungrateful. About how she resented us and wanted nothing to do with the family. About how she abandoned you, Dad, after college. Each accusation felt like a fresh wound. None of that is true, I said quietly. I am starting to see that, Tyler replied. Mom has been creating her own narrative for years, and we all just accepted it. But today, when she was so blatantly trying to take your house, something clicked for me. If she could lie about that, what else has she lied about? Dad looked stricken. I had no idea she was saying those things about Haley. She was careful to never say them around you, Tyler explained. It was always when you were not there. Little comments, suggestions, building this image of Haley as the villain in our family story. The revelation of this systematic campaign against me was overwhelming. All these years I had been fighting a battle I did not even know was happening. I am sorry I believed her, Tyler said, looking directly at me. And I am sorry I participated in trying to use your lake house without your permission. It was wrong. His apology was unexpected and deeply appreciated. Thank you for saying that. We talked for another hour, the three of us beginning the painful process of unraveling 2 decades of misunderstandings and manipulations. By the end, we had reached a tentative compromise. I think you should stay at the lake house, I told Dad and Tyler. There is plenty of room, and it would give us time to talk more to start rebuilding. Diane and Vanessa can stay at the resort if that is what they prefer. Are you sure? Dad asked. After everything that has happened? I am sure that I want to try to heal our relationship, I said. And I think having some time together, just the three of us, might be a good start. Tyler looked relieved. I will get my stuff from the resort, but do not expect Vanessa to join us. She always sides with Mom. That is her choice, I said. The invitation is open if she changes her mind. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Dad touched my arm. There is something else you should know. When we were planning this trip, Diane mentioned talking to a lawyer about adverse possession laws. What are those? Tyler asked. It is a legal concept where someone can potentially claim ownership of property if they have been openly using and maintaining it for a certain period of time. I explained my real estate background kicking in. But it would never work with the lake house. I visit regularly, pay the utilities, and have clear legal title. I think she was hoping to establish some kind of claim, Dad admitted. She kept talking about how she had been the one organizing family trips there for years, how she had been adding improvements to the property. Like what improvements? I asked skeptically. She had the kitchen faucet replaced last year, and she bought new curtains for the living room. I could not help but laugh at the absurdity. A faucet and curtains do not constitute a legal claim to real estate. I know that now, Dad said sheepishly, but it shows how determined she was to consider the lake house as family property rather than yours. This final piece of information confirmed what I had suspected. Diane's exclusion of me from the reunion was not a simple family slight. It was part of a longer-term strategy to sever my connection to the property. The realization was chilling, but also clarifying. I had not overreacted by changing the locks and asserting my ownership. I had protected what was rightfully mine. The rest of that summer marked a turning point in our family dynamics. Dad and Tyler stayed at the lake house with me for a week, while Diane remained at the resort, refusing all invitations to discuss the situation. Vanessa initially stayed with her mother, but eventually came for a day visit, bringing her children to swim in the lake. During that week, we had conversations that were 20 years overdue. Dad shared more about his grief after losing Mom, his regrets about how quickly he had remarried, his gradual awareness of Diane's manipulations. Tyler told stories from his perspective, revealing patterns of behavior I had never known about ways that Diane had subtly reinforced divisions within our blended family. She would always praise Vanessa and me when we excluded you, he admitted one evening, as we sat on the dock watching the sunset. If we invited you to join us for something, she would find a way to make us feel like we had betrayed her. It was subtle, but consistent. You were just kids, I said. You cannot blame yourselves for responding to that kind of conditioning. But we are not kids anymore, Tyler pointed out. I am 34 now. I should have seen it sooner. By the end of the week, we had established new boundaries and expectations. Dad agreed to transfer responsibility for all lake house expenses to me, making the ownership unambiguously clear. I gave him a new key, with the understanding that he would always be welcome but would need to check with me before planning group visits. I want you to feel that this is still your second home, I told him. But I need everyone to respect that it is legally my property, not a general family asset. He agreed readily, seeming relieved to have clear guidelines after years of ambiguity. When Dad returned home, he had a difficult conversation with Diane. According to his later account, she initially refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, insisting that she had only been trying to preserve family harmony by planning the reunion without me. I made it clear that her treatment of Haley has to change if our marriage is going to work, Dad told me during one of our weekly phone calls. I let things go too far for too long. I was proud of him for finally taking a stand, though I harbored no illusions about Diane's capacity for genuine change. Some relationships in our family would likely remain distant, defined by polite interaction rather than warmth, and that was okay. I was learning that family connections exist on a spectrum, and not every relationship needs to be close to be functional. By fall, I had hired a property management company to help maintain the lake house, ensuring it received the care it deserved year-round. I also began the process of renovating, starting with the master bedroom. I chose colors and materials that honored my mother's taste, while adding my own touch, creating a space that bridged past and present. In a gesture that touched me deeply, Dad sent me boxes of photos and mementos of Mom that he had stored in their attic, things Diane had removed from display years ago, but that he had quietly preserved. Sorting through these treasures, I felt reconnected to my mother in a way I had not experienced in years. Tyler and I developed a surprisingly strong relationship. He began bringing his girlfriend Jocelyn to the lake house for occasional weekends, and I enjoyed getting to know her. She was kind and insightful, and she encouraged Tyler to continue rebuilding his relationship with me. "Family dynamics are complicated," she said, during one of our late-night conversations on the deck. "But they are not fixed. They can evolve if people are willing to do the work." Vanessa remained more distant, caught between loyalty to her mother and a growing awareness of the family dysfunction. She would bring her children for day visits occasionally, but always declined to stay overnight. I respected her boundaries while keeping the door open for a closer relationship in the future. As for Diane, she and I established a cool but civil détente. She no longer referred to the lake house as ours in social media posts, and I made efforts to acknowledge her place in my father's life during family gatherings. We would never be close, but we could coexist without open hostility. The most profound change, however, was within myself. Standing up for my rights, enforcing boundaries, and refusing to accept exclusion from my own property had shifted something fundamental in my self-perception. I was no longer the peripheral family member, the one who could be pushed aside without consequences. I had claimed my place, not just as the legal owner of the lake house, but as someone deserving of respect and inclusion. My mother had left me the lake house as a gift of love, a piece of herself that would endure beyond her lifetime. By protecting it, I had honored not just her memory, but also her intention that I should never be without a place that was unquestionably mine, a place where I belonged. Life is not about accumulating properties or possessions, but about establishing our place in the world, about creating spaces where we can be fully ourselves. Sometimes that requires difficult confrontations and painful revelations. Sometimes it means changing locks, both literal and metaphorical, to protect what is precious to us. If my story resonates with you, if you have ever had to fight for your place in your family or defend what is rightfully yours, please share your experience in the comments. I would love to hear how you handled similar situations. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of standing up for yourself with dignity and strength. Thank you for listening. And remember, setting boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect and ultimately self-love.